The online dialogue series of Refugee Poets was commissioned by the Special Initiative on Displacement SIF program of the Civil Peace Service of GIZ. We appreciate the discussions and insights shared. The opinions expressed in these dialogue series are those of the speakers. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of GIZ.
Hi everyone, my name is Dina and on my side I have a guitarist, Komora. So let's enjoy, Kuna wakati mbele sioni najiuliza, mbona kama hizi shida zimekawia kuisha, katikati ya maswali nasikia sauti ndani, imebeba ujasiri, ikinitaka nikiri, nikisema mimi ni wa juu, mimi ni wa juu, mimi ni wa juu, juu sana, mimi ni wa juu, mimi ni wa juu, mimi ni wa juu, juu sana. Sitafsiriwi kwa haya machozi na magumu, mimi ni mshindi tu kama usindiye Mungu. Haijalishi ni giza, wewe ni nuru yangu, nitashinda hii vita na vyote vitakwisha. Tasimama tena, tainuka tena, mimi ni wa juu tu, mimi ni wa juu tu, nitasimama tena, tainuka tena, mimi ni wa juu tu, mimi ni wa juu tu, mimi vita na vyote vitaisha.
Thank you so much, Dina and Komora. That was such an amazing performance, and we really appreciate you. My name is Emmanuel Mamadi, and I'll be your host of the forum today. This is the fourth forum where we are going to discuss refugee pertinent issues in relating to the refugees. We discussed about peace and security. We discussed about opening and closing of the forum, opening and closing of the camps. And now we also discussed about livelihoods and socio-economic activities of the refugees. And today's discussion, we're going to talk about the state of refugee law and policy in Kenya, talking about gaps, challenges, and opportunities that are going to take place in this discussion today. And I have a panelist here today, and also I'm privileged to also have an audience today. We are going to take part in this discussion, maybe just to break it down. And from 1960, after the independence, the refugees enjoy what we call the golden age in 1963. Up to 1991, the refugees had the rights, were moving out and about in Kenya. There were no limitations until 1991, there was the encampment policy. But before you go much into further details about the policy and also the law of this country, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the partners on board with this program. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Anika Initiative, who have been so instrumental in supporting the program, and also the Refugee and also the Civil Peace Service Special Initiative on Displacement, the German corporation. And now to continue the conversation, you can get them on Anika Initiative and Refugee Kenya. Now, getting into the conversation, I have a guest here who I'll start with the introductions, perhaps with Jamin. Perhaps you can just give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do.
So thank you for having me here to discuss the pertinent issues about refugees. My name is Jamin Kuswania. I'm the Reviewed Advocacy Manager for the International Rescue Committee, which is geared to looking at how to enhance livelihoods and also opening up the space to ensure that refugees are actually self-reliant within the boundaries of Kenya, being cognizant that that will need to look at our policy, our legal environment, and also the social coexistence between refugee and the host community here in the country where they are currently being hosted.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Welcome on board. Mr. Bogi.
Thank you. My name is Obogi Jonathan. I am a lawyer. I'm a consultant in matters human rights, immigration laws, but I'm also a lecturer at Strathmore University and Riara University.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Bogi. Ajak.
Thank you, Mamadi, for having me here. My name is Ajak Ajak. I'm a refugee lawyer, and I'm currently a trainee advocate at the Kenya School of Law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ajak. This is the second time to host Ajak. Thank you, and you're welcome. Caroline, Miss Caroline.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Caroline Kamau. I am an advocate of the High Court. I am currently working for the judiciary, and I'm really glad to be here and look forward to the conversation.
You're all welcome. And we also have our audience who will take questions from them when you'll be having the conversations. Now, and also we have the sign language interpreter. We have Clinton, who will be doing the sign language interpretation, and we also have Faith, who will be doing the sign language interpretation. Now, before we get into the matter, I've given a brief history when it comes to the policy and also the refugee law in Kenya. Now, just to start us off, we see Jasmine worked in terms of protection and also advocacy of the refugees. How do you say is the status of the refugees when it comes to refugee law in Kenya?
I think we appreciate that we have a law that governs how refugee matters are actually run into the country. Having got this particular law in 2006, the Refugee Act of 2006, previously refugee administration being done under different aspects of law, including the Ministry of Home Affairs, including the Aliens Act into place. So I think we appreciate that at least we have a Refugee Act that deals with how then refugees are to be handled. But then having said that, is that when you look at 15 years ago, since we had the Refugee Act, many things have actually changed. And so the economy of the country, we have had incumbent policy within that particular time, we have had consideration for refugee going home and the pursuit towards durable solutions. And so what I would say is that we have deficiencies that exist within the 2006 Act that would need to actually be looked at if we are to move from the humanitarian aid and dependency that refugees have always been getting to development aspect, which then guarantees self-reliance, social and economic inclusion of the refugees when they're actually being hosted here into the country. I acknowledge that we have had attempts to review this particular law. We have not been successful. The last one being in 2017, where the president didn't assent to the bill because of lack of public participation. But we have the Refugee Bill 2019 currently in Parliament, and we are hoping that the assent of the president will actually change the way refugees are actually reside in the country and boost the social and economic inclusion that has been lacking for a long period of time.
Okay, you've talked about the Act of 2006,
Yes.
and it covers quite an extensive. You've also mentioned the pending bill of 2019. Just to shift gears to Ajak, and you've had this discussion before. You're a lawyer, and also you're a refugee. What should you make of this, considering the history? Has the 2006 been quite an effective act?
Thank you, Mamadi. First thing, it is always good to look back to see what the law was meant to achieve. And looking back at how refugees are being managed for the last 50 years that Kenya has, since Kenya actually ratified the 1951 Convention in 1966. The first thing is that when Kenya actually gave out the responsibility back then in 1991, because the first time that Kenyan were receiving a lot of refugees in Kenya was 1991.
Yes.
And because from South Sudan and from Somalia, so Kenya actually thought that this one is too much for the government to handle, so they ceded the responsibility to UNHCR. So UNHCR had been handling refugees all this time until at a certain point when Kenyans start thinking that refugees now, because of the freedom of movement and equal opportunities to job for those who are economically independent, are able to contribute. So they had to come up with a law to actually limit the access, the affairs, in the manner in which refugees can participate economically and the manner in which they can move. And that's why they came up with the incumbent policy in 2006. It was never there. People used to move freely. But since it was introduced, actually that is the beginning of the problems for refugees. And insecurity is one of the things that Refugee Act 2006 has brought.
Was it a necessary move to bring the incumbent policy? Maybe just to get to the human rights lawyer, Mr. Obogi, was it necessary to bring the human rights or the incumbent policy actually?
I think when you began, there is something that important that you mentioned, the history, the development of these policies, of these laws. Again, back, one writer, Ko Maina, says that, when we have the journey of refugees in Kenya in the early 1970s, Kenya was glad to actually welcome refugees in the country, where we had actually these refugees get formal education or even formal job employment. But then now the discussion shifted from now, as you said, integration to a balance between protection and national security. Okay. Now, the incumbent policy was meant to ensure that individuals, refugees, are supposed to be in camps. Okay. That it is easy, the argument is, to trace and know that the position of this person is, the status is a refugee, and your place of work or residence is in a camp. Okay. And that is why they tried even to have a cap of number of refugees that we can have in the country, which was declared unconstitutional. Now, the question as to whether that actually achieved that objective is another debate altogether, because, as he said, even with the introduction of these laws and policies, we had a surge of more insecurity issues. And then we had situations whereby now there was castigation from the international community, because these are human rights. These are individuals who have inherent rights. And then infringing on these rights, because we can always have a debate of when do you say these rights can be limited. So the answer is still moot. You cannot say for sure that actually that was achieved. The government had its own reasons, which, as he mentioned, the 2019 bill tends to be more aligned to the international instruments and the Bill of Rights. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe get to Carol, Miss Carol. We see from the history, Kenya had a good stance when it comes to receiving refugees, integrating the refugees into the system. And also now, this stopped in 1951 after the enactment of the incumbent policy. Now, what made Kenya change this? What made Kenya change its stance towards the refugees? And Ajak mentioned partly of it when it comes to numbers. And is it a valid reason for this to happen?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think the reason why this changed over time is refugees coming into the country and being hosted has always seemed to be something that would be temporary. But currently, as we speak, we started hosting them early, the 1980s, 1990s, and with time, we're even getting now bigger numbers coming into the country. So it's no longer looking as temporal as it ought to have been, but now we're having a protracted situation. And so now we look at now the host community. How is the host community supposed to take that? Because there is a scarcity of resources. I wish we were a developed country, but we are developing. So we take in refugees because of the legal obligations that are upon us. But for the long haul, how is it sustainable? Is it viable to have them here because of the scarcity of resources? We're looking for the same opportunities, be it job opportunities. If it's businesses, the refugees and locals are also targeting the same. If I've set up a shop somewhere, we are fighting for the same clientele. Like if I have a shop somewhere, the refugee is hoping to sell to a Kenyan. I'm also hoping to sell to a Kenyan. So there's that protracted situation, and we are fighting for scarce resources.
Okay, yes, Jasmine, she has asked it. Is it sustainable to host them? And also, let's look at the numbers when it comes to the 1980s, the 1970s we talked about. How many refugees were there compared to now? We have almost half a million refugees in this country. How sustainable is it?
I think designation of areas for refugee residence and the incumbent policy did not actually come with the 2006 Act. After 2011 and 2012 terrorism attacks that happened, it is until 2014 that the incumbent policy actually came into place. And so designate refugees residing in camps is viewed for humanitarian support. It is easier to support refugees within a particular camp. However, that in itself should not be the end of it. That the camp should be there, in my view, for humanitarian aid and humanitarian support. But then we need to open them up so that our situation in the country, as Karo said, we have a protracted situation for refugees in this particular country. The measures that we had in 1991 and 2006 were for dealing with the temporary measure for refugees. But we have been having refugees now in the country, large number of them for the last 28 years. And so the thinking about how then do we deal with the populations that we certainly have need to be different from what actually we had in 2006. And my take then is that if we pursue social and economic inclusion, then we are empowering the refugees that we have to be able to contribute to the economy in terms of sustainability. We are also empowering them that in case they repatriate to go back to their country, they're actually being economically empowered, they have skills that can go out there and develop their own countries. We cannot run away from the responsibility of hosting persons who have run away from issues and insecurities in their home countries. And therefore, we need actually to host them. The question about sustainability then becomes, how do we want to host them? Refugees in this particular country, they are not asking that the Kenyan government and humanitarian agencies continue feeding them. They're asking, how can we be given an opportunity for us to be able to tap into the opportunities that exist? How can we be given to enhance our skills and be able to support ourselves? If that was actually going to happen, then refugees will be able to contribute to the economic welfare of this particular country. IFC did a particular study in Kakuma and said that there is a huge contribution of the refugee in the economy of Turkana, in the economy of Kakuma. And therefore, it is us to look at how do we tap into the potential that comes with with the refugees that come within our own country. Everybody acknowledges that early migration of refugees, whether it's from Germany to the US, has had a huge contribution to the US economy. And therefore, how we tap into that is what will show how beneficial that becomes to us as a country. And therefore, is it sustainable? Yes, it is sustainable. But if we put enough measures into place, government comes up with policies that are friendly for refugees. The international community then comes up to support the economic and the social inclusion of that. We can be able to host and coexist with the refugees within our own society. If anything else, we have only about 500,000 refugees in this particular country, in a country of 50 million people. So it is the tip of an iceberg. So if we complain about the problems and the trouble that the country has, the developing country, then it has nothing to do with the less than 0.1% of the population who are actually refugees.
Okay, yes. And Jack, you've grown up in the camp. How practical is it to bring on the table the discussion when it comes to social inclusion of refugees?
Just like Jermaine has said, the main reason why camps should exist is to actually provide humanitarian within a particular area that has UNHCR officers on the ground. That is the most important thing that should be the basis of having the camps if really Kenya is serious about socio-economic inclusion of refugees, because there are those refugees indeed who cannot sustain their lives in the urban centers. But the question is, which James had left out, and I would like to add, how about those who have acquired some kind of economic independence? They are able to provide for themselves and they would like to settle in any part of Kenya. Why is the Kenyan government still holding them in the camps? The assets and the skills that they have cannot make them productive in the camps. So they want to migrate to urban centers where these skills are needed and they are required. And so that is one thing that we need to answer. So as someone who has been in the camp about sustainability, starting in early 2000, because I came in 2000, that's when I came to Kakuma. I was young, life was good and everything was okay. At my early life, camp was my only good place. It was my safe haven. I went to the school where you go there for 3 hours and then you come back and then others go in the afternoon. That is the cycle. It was good. But, and I have also seen back then, according to what I've heard from those who were there, like my elder brother who came to Kakuma back in 1991, when they came, there were no Turkana people around. But when the camps were established, settlement, Turkana people start coming closer to the camps because there was some kind of business activities that were happening. Turkana people come and sell goods to the refugees. You know, the market developed. So you see, that's why Turkana people feel right now, if you are taking away the refugees, take us with them. Yeah, you have heard of those slogans, right? It is because of such things. Yeah, so for them, they see that there is no need for it, and the government is forging a statement that the host communities have a burden, something that even the host community themselves, they are not seeing.
Yes, actually the government was saying that the accusation made that where the refugees have been seen as a burden. And also in the 1990s, we'll see the government was citing proliferation of arms, small arms, when it comes to Somali refugees. So I don't know, how will we approach this then?
Yeah, that is so true. And just like, when your neighbors are undergoing conflict, like the neighboring countries of Kenya, they have been going through conflict. And even if for Al-Shabaab, if you are running away, someone is following you and you have a gun. So sometimes you may need that gun when you are going back. So it's about the government of Kenya. How does it come up with a better protection policy? How does it protect its borders? So that someone who's coming with a gun will have to leave the gun at the border and come into the camp. You see? So those are some of the challenges within the national security management system. And I do not think we have to blame this on the refugees, because the government is there to protect its own citizens, and hosting refugees is a responsibility that the government has taken upon itself, and you can't run away because maybe there are some thugs within the camp. You have to know how to handle them, how to deal with them, and how to try them within the judicial system.
Yeah. He's talked about the refugee government taking responsibility. However, you see that the government It's like they abandoned the responsibilities to the UNHCR. And now let's talk about the 2006 Act of 2006. How ineffective has it been towards the refugees of Kenya? Because the Act provides for establishment of legally binding framework for refugees protection. How effective has it been, or ineffective?
Maybe I'll do that with a quick joinder with what my colleagues have said, and that is on the sustainability issue. I think for me, I feel like there is something that we can learn from how Uganda, for example, deals with their refugees, because Uganda has a duality sort of way of dealing with the refugees, where one, if a refugee is unable to fend for themselves and they're actually in need of the humanitarian assistance, then that sort of program is left to the UNHCR. But then if a refugee has an ability to fend for himself or herself, then that particular person is integrated into society. Okay? So that duality tends to strike the balance between the people who need help and those actually who can be able to, as they say, infuse this enthusiasm and development into the economy. Now, the 2006, the Act itself, to me, seemed like an afterthought. It's like a knee-jerk. Okay? They're here. We've had a scenario where we have refugees have been coming into the economy. We've been able to use these people actually to sort of develop. But then the numbers are surging. We are having cases of xenophobia because people are saying they're taking our jobs, as she said. Then how do we deal with them? Because the Alien Act, the Immigration Act, never defined who a refugee was. Okay? So we had the international instruments giving us these frameworks. So the Act in itself has gaps. First, does not provide mechanisms through which, as he said, you bring in people, okay? But you don't have mechanisms through which those people that no longer need the basic humanitarian assistance can be used in a society. We cannot be talking about repatriation, when we are signatories to instruments that, preach of the principle called non-refoulement. Like, you cannot take somebody back to a place where he's afraid of being persecuted or back to danger zones, okay? So the discussion about development, that I hope, we're having more discussions. Even at the international arena, we still haven't reached to a very conclusive discussion on how well to protect the refugees. But as a country, the 2006, the Act in itself lacks a lot on on providing protection for the refugees and even for the locals, because we need to strike the balance. We need to be able to have a scenario where the locals feel safe. Remember, the issue of corruption has a bearing in how the refugees are used as a scapegoat, for the firearms and other small crimes. So I think the discussion needs to be had, but not just that, because we can have an instrument, but without implementation still, we going back to the same pit that we're coming from. Yeah.
Okay, and Carol, do you think the refugees have been protected effectively?
To that, I would say yes and no. Like the Refugee Act that's currently in place. So I'll begin with a no. The current act we have into place gives rights and responsibilities for refugees, but have these rights been codified, or are we relying on international instruments that say that refugees should not be discriminated, refugees should be given work permits, access to livelihoods? So we find we have an act that gives certain rights and responsibilities, but we have not codified it into our local act. So it leaves room for some form of ambiguity. But if I was to say that for the yes bit, we'd look at the Refugee Act again we have in place. It set motion for the kind of management model we have today. It created administrative bodies. Now we have RAS, but it was initially the Department of Refugee Affairs. We have an appeals mechanism. The act in itself was a good thing. It set in place the legal policy and regulatory framework we have now that's currently dealing with refugees. It may not be adequate, but we have something going and something that can be built upon now with the refugee bill that's pending discussion in Senate or presidential assent. We are yet to see how that will play out. So it's a yes and no.
It's a yes or no. Okay, before we get to the audience, maybe just a last thought on Jamin. You worked with refugee protection. Do you think they've been protected enough?
I think protection in the broader sense, no. that because protection extends to looking at whether they feel safe, whether they have been discriminated, whether there are situations in the areas of residence they feel secure, whether their basic needs are actually provided into play. And so, in terms of safety, yes, safety has been guaranteed to them. But in terms of discrimination, they have faced discrimination in terms of access to services. They have faced discrimination in terms of what is the value of the documentation that they actually extended into. They have faced discrimination in terms of even being profiled in the country. They've been profiled as terrorists for quite a long period of time. They've been targeted for police swoops in this particular city for quite a long period of time. So in that broader definition of protection, then we'll say it is actually lacking. And therefore, as Caro has said, we need to do much more so that then refugee can feel safe in this particular country and be able to access basic needs, their documents, which is a key human right aspect, actually then recognized more and actually respected within the country.
Okay, so it's a matter of ish. They haven't been feeling safe about it. Yes, so maybe just to get to my audience. See, I have an audience there. I see Genevieve, welcome. You're the one holding the mic. Do you have a question?
It's more of, I need more clarification.
Yes.
Because as a refugee who has lived here in Kenya for the past 20 years, I feel like life is a bit uncertain right now because before, as Ajak has said, everything was okay. When I was going through school, everything was fine. But now when it comes to the stage where I want to be part of the contribution of the economic in that realm of economic situation here in Kenya, it becomes difficult. So I want to know, like, how safe I am in terms of my contribution as a person who has gone through school here in Kenya. How safe I am? Like, how safe should I be? Like, how comfortable should I be knowing that my future is secure in terms of I am not sure right now if I'll ever get a job because it has been hectic at the moment. So I'm not sure where I stand at the moment. So if there were any clarifications around that, I would really appreciate.
Okay, I'll give Mr. Bogi the chance to, or anyone else who would like to answer that. How safe is she when it comes to opportunities?
I think I thought Ajak would be the best person to say that because he said he was in the camp and whatnot. Mine might be more theoretical because of the laws and whatnot. And as I said, we, as a country, we are yet to fully actually implement the whole integration policy and laws. Okay, so that you're able to know that if this individual has particular skills and expertise, then they're able to get the job in a very competitive market. So that you're able to get placement based on meritocracy as opposed to, place of origin and your status in the country. So I think maybe to give you a better understanding would be him, really.
Yes, Jack.
The truth is, on the ground, is that we come from we are facing the same uncertainty, yeah? Because the Refugee Act 2006, which is the principal act that is supposed to codify the international law that Kenya has ratified, does not provide the framework upon which refugees may actually be employed in Kenya. It does not at all, yeah? And the few refugees who have been employed are those who have actually linked up with international organizations and get them work permits and they are able to work. Okay, the Refugee Convention relating to the status of refugees 1951 only says that refugees will only have equal chances of employment just like foreign nationals, you see? So which means for a refugee to actually be employed in Kenya, you must be someone with exceptional skills for you to be given work permit to work in Kenya. And that situation for people like us who have been in Kenya for the last 20 years, and we feel unsafe. We are not safe going back, even after you have acquired the schooling and everything, all the skills that you want, and you want to contribute in Kenya, is one of the challenges that we are having. UNHCR is trying to assist people like Genevieve and myself to maybe get work permit, and the government of Kenya, because the Refugee Affairs Secretary is the one that actually processes these work permits. And it is very difficult. There is a vetting process that you have to undergo for you to actually get that work permit. So, and you have to pay for all those. That's not the problem. The problem is they hinder it. It is not issued easily. Yeah. So, and number two is that you must have some documents to facilitate you. Like for me, I'm still based in the camp. I applied for data transfer to be made an urban refugee, which they said there is a directive that was issued 3 years ago by Nkaiseri saying that refugees should not be, data transfer will no longer be happening. If you are in the camp, you will be in the camp. So like for me to be here, I have a document that says you will have to travel to Nairobi for a specific reason for 3 months. Once that is done, you get back to
Is this an effect to the incumbent policy?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is because of the incumbent policy, so I can't be allowed to stay anywhere in Kenya, apart from the camp where I'm registered as a refugee. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are some of the challenges. And for this dialogue, integration, because I have read the joint statement of UNHCR and the government of Kenya, if they are serious about integration, this were now, because integration means we will be given the same opportunities with the citizens. And that is where now it is going to really give chances to refugees who are self-reliant, who have achieved who have some skills and they have achieved some economic independence. They can invest like Kenyans. They can actually be employed like any other ordinary Kenyan. Except, the Kenya may have exceptions of places that they do not want refugees to be employed, maybe military and elsewhere. But if they feel like they will provide those, then it will bring some kind of certainty. So you will know this is where you can't go, but all the rest you are able to do. Yeah. Like myself as a professional lawyer, I still don't know whether I can open my law firm in Nairobi and serve people. Because refugees, you have no right to actually open a law firm. Okay. Yeah, and I have not seen refugees who open the law firms before. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Carol, when you hear such stories, such as Jack's story and Genevieve's story, about the safety and also opportunities, the challenges, what do you make of this? When it comes to the refugee law in Kenya, what do you make of this?
I think it saddens me. I think we should do better. As a host government, or even as a host community, we agree to take in refugees. We receive them, we register them, we agree to have them live amongst us. Then we have also urban refugees, and we also have the camp-based refugees. I feel we should do better. If you're talking about that in local integration, it has three. It has we should be looking at legal integration, in the sense that are we giving, so once we have an asylum seeker get formally recognized as a refugee, then is that an end in itself? The first thing we need to know, there are durable solutions for refugees. So local integration is one of them. Then we have voluntary repatriation, whereby some refugees can decide to go back to their country of origin, but that must be voluntary, must be done in a manner that is safe and in a dignified manner. Then now we have local integration that we're talking about. Then now we have resettlement. So even for that local integration, how are we looking at it? If we are saying that local integration means we have you on board and fully have you on board to the extent that you enjoy similar rights as citizens. So we look at it legally. Are we over and above recognizing you as refugees? Are we giving you, is there a legal pathway for you to get permanent residency or to even become a citizen? If it's economic integration, are we giving these refugees that we've formally recognized a means of production, land, whether it comes in form of, maybe you can lease it, you can rent it, or you're given a similar model to Kalobey, that you have a piece of land. You're given seeds, you're given farming implements, you have access to markets, you have access to credit, you have access to training. So that's economically. Then socially, again, what are we doing? Are there social bridges, like things that bring us together? Are there activities that the host community and refugees can do together, like sporting activities, such that we're able to break down the different stereotypes and perceptions that exist between us, and yet those social bridges would enable us bridge the gap. Instead of Kenyans living a secluded life as Kenyans, and then we have refugees in their own cocoons. But now the thing again, the encampment policy is really a disservice. I think if you were to take that out, local integration would work if we take away the encampment policy, such that now there is that free movement of refugees from the camp to the urban centers. But now the encampment policy, I feel, is a huge factor towards us socially integrating, or just local integration and just all forms of integration. If we seclude people, then what are we doing?
So we uplift the encampment policy.
They should lift the encampment.
Okay, I hope you've been answered, Genevieve. Yes. Any other question from the audience?
Hi, I'm Uwase. You've talked about the local integration. Is it being put into consideration? And the period of time maybe it will take? Because as at now, there's so much insecurity, also even in terms of education. Because documentation, we're always told that when you reach 18, you can have an ID. But for now, some of the kids that have reached 18, they don't have IDs. They need like scholarships, but they can't get the scholarships without the IDs. So like all that uncertainty, all that insecurity, like do we have a period of time that it will take to solve all these issues?
Yes. Jamin, you want to come in?
Yes. I think how our laws and policies were actually developed, they were developed in mind that the refugee status is a temporary nature. And so based on that, once we have had a protracted situations of refugee in the country for many years, when you look at the laws and the policies and even the processes that are there, they do not then respond to those particular needs that are brought up by the protracted situation that the refugees have been having within this particular country. When you look at if it's the Dab or it's Kakuma, majority of the refugees who finish high school, we have more than 20,000, we have them in thousands. They have never been able to proceed to tertiary level, so they remain within the camps. And so it is this particular high time when we are looking at durable solutions of integration, where then the pursuit of opening up, as Karo has said, moving away from the incumbent policy that then will guarantee economic inclusion and even social inclusion of refugees within the quarters. It is not enough that the Ministry of Education, for instance, has included refugees in both primary and high school education. We need them to move further and ask, so after high school education, so what? How can they be able to gather skills that can be beneficial and helpful out there into the economy? That becomes the biggest question. In terms of when this particular process will take, I would say it is work in progress. And so different actors, both government, humanitarian agencies, and even development partners, are actually looking into how do we spur integration of refugees within developing countries where they have actually been hosted for a long period of time. And we remain optimistic that the gains towards integration, though they have been slowly coming, we will ultimately get there. Our 2006 Act speaks that refugees have the right to wage earning employment. However, how they have been treated is that they have been treated just like any other foreigners. And therefore, they will need one to have a work permit. For them to access work permit, they will need to demonstrate that they have exceptional skills and competencies, just like any other particular foreigner will have. When you look at that, is that the Form 25 in the Immigration Act that every foreigner has to fill before they get work permit was never customized for refugees in mind. And therefore, we need to move towards looking and ensuring that our processes, our customization of processes actually has refugees bit, even including access to mobile money and even financial services. When you look at the know your customer details that are supposed to be there in the financial institutions, it speaks about the Kenyan ID, a military ID, a passport, or alien ID. The refugee ID is not one of the documents there. So I think entirely within all our processes that would include refugees in economic and social, we need to deliberately see that we have the inclusion of refugee documentation, we have inclusion of refugees in those particular spaces. If we are to fully look at integration within the fullness aspect of it, foreigners in this particular country, after 7 years, they can be able to apply to become citizens by naturalization. They need to demonstrate that they have been having a valid resident permit with this particular country. However, it's different. Section 17 of the Citizenship and Immigration Act that gives naturalization to persons has not included refugees as part of persons who will qualify into that. My position is that refugee residence in the country is a legal residence in the country, and therefore it needs to be one of the considerations that will be considered. Even if we will begin by saying, let us look for those that have been in the country for the last 25 years, then we move to 20 years, then it can be progressively for us moving towards integration of persons who have been in this particular country, born here, went to school here, work in this particular country. They must be able to call this particular country their home.
Okay. Thank you. You want to add something?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I
think I also want to add you've had the discussion that Kenya intends by 2022 to actually close the camps. And then there was a joint agreement between the government and then the UNHCR. But I think important to note is what one of the top officials said, that this is an aspiration. Because we've had this discussion before when they say they need to close the camps. But even in that joint agreement or discussion they've had, one of the things they've discussed is local integration and the whole issue of resettlement. And resettlement, we have countries like Australia, US, UK that have been taking refugees, but then over time they've been reducing the numbers. Because again, you realize the camps in Kenya were never meant to protract, to last for that long. But now they realize that there are other crises, there are areas whereby more refugees are needed with, as they would say, urgent needs. So the whole argument and question of whether they will actually reach to a point where they will get these, they will be treated like foreigners or over time have the right to be citizens of this country, to me, again, needs good political goodwill, which lacks. Because when you have governments deciding and saying that we are going to send these people back to their countries, that has a very negative connotation. Doesn't seem that they have these refugees at heart. So when we're having these discussions and the development of policies, one of the fundamental things that we have to look is even, borrow from countries that have had refugees, countries that have actually successfully integrated these refugees. We do have elements of insecurities. We cannot wish them away. But then how are we dealing with this situation? And then how are we able to legitimately integrate individuals? We have refugees who are born in this country, who have a right, inherent right, to work and live in this country. So for me, I say we will still again circle back to the whole issue of political goodwill, and then development of these policies to be able to encompass, the long-term solutions. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Obogi. Ms. Owasi, you've been answered? Okay. Yes, we'll get back again to the audience later. But now we've talked about the gaps, and Jamin, you've mentioned about the gaps, and you've talked about the challenges, especially when it comes, and Mr. Obogi mentioned about the inherent human rights. Carol, what do we make about these inherent human rights? We see the gaps of them not being able to be included in this country. So what do you make of this before you start discussing about the encampment policy and its ramifications?
Human rights are for everyone. They are inherent. Just by the fact that you're a human being, you're entitled to human rights. Human rights are inalienable. We are here in Kenya. We cannot say that as a Kenyan citizen I have more or bigger human rights than a refugee or another foreigner living within the same country. I feel the fact that we have agreed to host refugees, we need to, as a host country, we need to go back and understand what just the rubric of international law on human rights. We need to our work should not just be receiving, managing, hosting these people, but we need to, at the back of our minds, remember that we have ratified some of these laws, we have domesticated some of these laws, so we need to do better. We need to reaffirm our commitment to not just hosting, but doing better and abiding by the laws, the international laws that exist, the regional laws, even our own domestic laws, our constitution. We have a whole chapter on human rights. So we should do better. Yes, we should keep to our commitment.
Which makes me ask: do you think the Kenya refugee encampment policy has breached the rights of refugees' freedom under the international law? Do you think that it has breached the rights of refugee freedom?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. I know. As Kenya, we have that. As Kenya, we are a sovereign state. So of course, the government at the end of the day has the authority to determine who comes into this country, where they stay, where they move, and all. But on the other side, I feel yes, we by having that encampment policy or restricting the movement of refugees, we are infringing against their rights. Our constitution, we have that right of movement. In fact, it says persons are entitled to move in and about. It's not even Kenyan citizens and all. There's that, yes? It's not definitive. So I feel, in a sense, yes, we are infringing on their rights. In as much as Kenya, as a state, we have that sovereign power to determine who comes in, where they stay, when they live. Okay. But we are infringing.
Jermaine, are we infringing on the rights of refugees?
I think the incumbent policy in itself, the effects that it brings are actually infringements to human rights. One, the freedom of movement is a right to all persons. We even actually have a High Court judgment that spoke that the incumbent policy is restrictive to the freedom of movement of the persons, and because of that, it's unconstitutional. When you look at what then the incumbent policy does, locks out people from being able to advance their education, for instance, tertiary education. Locks out people from being able to advance their economic aspirations and economic opportunities that they have. Locks people from being able to tap into the social inclusion aspect that they are, then I will definitely say that it's an infringement to the rights of these particular people. So the social and economic rights of refugees actually infringed by the fact that we actually have an incumbent policy that restricts them to one particular area. What then has happened over time is that support that humanitarian organizations and UNHCR that was giving to refugees has actually waned over time. Though previously they will say that they are being provided sufficiently at the camps, it is not the case. And that's why it is high time that we remove that aspect of the incumbent policy to let those particular refugees be able to provide for themselves, participate in economic aspect, and become self-reliant on themselves. When you ask a majority of refugees, they'll tell you they're not looking for handouts. They're looking, where is the opportunity that I can go out, tap, and be able to sufficiently provide for myself and provide for my own family. When you hear the proponents of the incumbent policy and you look at the origin of it, you sympathize with government by asking the question, does it serve the purpose? Because 2012, 2013, we have insecurity, we have terrorism attack, there is information that we trace this into the refugee camps, and therefore now we bring the incumbent policy. Once you have persons in the camp who cannot be able to attain economic opportunities, they become vulnerable people. They even become susceptible to be used for terrorism activities. My position has always been that if you have persons, you give them the choice to go out, exploit their own potential and particular skills, then they are not vulnerable to be exploited for those particular purposes. But if you lock people in a particular camp, 200,000 of people, there is nothing they do when they wake up in the morning. They can't proceed past high school education. You make them susceptible then to be engaged for terrorism activities. And therefore, if we open that particular space, you actually then letting people to go out there, and you heal this aspect of the security interface that we keep on complaining. Because the truth of the matter, police cannot be able to police the entire camp 24/7. And therefore, if the more people you hold together, the more issues of insecurity that will keep on getting year in, year out. And therefore, that thought of bringing encampment policy to be able to prevent or to create security aspect doesn't hold water.
It doesn't hold water. Mr. Bogi, you mentioned about the principle of reform. How practical is it? And do you think Kenya has gone against this principle?
Yeah, so the principle of non-refoulement required, it's actually, what in a legal term has attained what we'll call, it's a peremptory norm or use cogent. So we don't need to have that principle in an instrument, for example, in a treaty or not. It has attained a status of customary international law, which then requires that nobody should be able to be taken back to a place where they are afraid of being persecuted. Okay, either political, religion. We have all those itemization in the 1951 Refugee Convention and even in the African Refugee Convention, the OAU Refugee Convention. But then on the practicality of that, I think we have had attempts before. This is not the first time actually that we have a government saying that they're going to close down a camp without putting in measures through which, you're closing the camp, you're taking them back to where they fled, okay, without ensuring that the situation in the country that they ran from actually has been stabilized. So the whole issue of having refugees taken back to their country, repatriated. She mentioned the question of voluntary repatriation, where you have a discussion, and we have. Let's take Somalia as a case in point. We have scenarios in Somalia. Things have not been better. They say things are getting better, but again, practically, they are not better. The government should therefore think beyond repatriation, think beyond just closing down the camps. Because when they were having the discussion of, local integration or even resettlement, countries actually deciding that now we're going to take the refugees, because we have close to 460-something thousand refugees. If you look at it practically, it's not a huge number. But then, are we done with the crisis? Because we're saying we're closing it down, but then you're not saying that, we cannot have civil violence in a particular country that will again bring the spillover. So maybe, again, something I felt that I needed to talk about the encampment policy, which, for a moment, to be the devil's advocate and say the argument has always been that, there's the whole issue of security. The right of movement is not an absolute right. It can be curtailed, it can be limited. But then the law as well provides mechanism. You cannot just, by your own whims, say that you're limiting or curtailing these rights. You're saying that individuals need to be in a particular camp, but then they still have a right to get work permit. Where are they getting this work permit from? Nairobi, not in the camp. So it means that they have to move, come to Nairobi and get the work permit. But then there are no mechanisms through which that can be done. So local integration, repatriation, okay, those are actually mechanisms or avenues that can be used to solve this problem. But you don't repatriate without first ascertaining or establishing that it is secure, it is safe for these people to go back. If the government of Kenya, by any chance, tends to do that or take them by force back to their countries, they will be committing a crime against humanity.
What becomes of Kenya when this is done? Because we saw in 2007, Somalis, some of them were taken back.
Yeah.
Yes. So what becomes of Kenya when it comes to its international image?
It gets dented. At that time, when that happened, you saw what happened. The international community was up in arms. They were saying that we're actually committing crimes against humanity, we're violating human rights. It happens. But there's something called realpolitik. It is more of what is the reality. We have the law, okay? We have international laws. We have dictators who have done things and said, this is a Western democracy. whatever that we're dealing with, we should be able to be given the rights to govern ourselves. There is the whole argument of state sovereignty that is always flagged. State sovereignty means that we possess the right to act and do as we so wish within our borders. Okay? But we are signatories to international treaties. And unlike the independence constitution, actually, that required domestication of these treaties, the current constitution says that as long as we've pended the signature, as long as we've ratified these instruments, then we are bound by them. Yes. Okay? So internationally, it will be a bad picture. It will not be serving justice to the refugees themselves, even to us as Kenyans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to chip into what Jonathan has discussed, there is a statement that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, yeah? And considering that refugees are within the Kenyan borders, and the government of Kenya is actually committing these kind of injustices against refugees, it cannot be said that the government of Kenya is actually not doing injustice to the Kenyan nation, yeah? Kenya has received international goodwill for the several decades that it has hosted refugees. That is one thing we have to be cognizant of, yeah? And if Kenya now is turning its back against these people and is not following the right procedures, then the international community may as well have to look again and say, okay, we have been trying this. So what is Kenya up to now? Because these are matters that have gone to court, especially the issue of non-refoulement. In 2016, when the government of Kenya came up with the issue of taking back the Somali refugees, this matter was taken to court by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, yeah? And the court said that this was against the principle of non-refoulement. Because for you to actually repatriate people, for it to be voluntary, it starts with a dialogue between the three agencies. The country of origin, the host country, and the UNHCR. You have to come up with a tripartite agreement, which is going to set up the procedure that has to be done. And it is going to actually say that those who want to go back, there has to be places that have been identified back in the country of origin. There has to be a mechanism of sustaining them there, where they are going to settle. It is a long process. And for Kenya to just say that in 2022, the camps will be closed and the refugees will be taken back to their own countries, it is against the principle of non-refoulement. And just like Obogia said, this one, it is an international peremptory norm that you can't run away from. It is something that Kenya has adopted under Article 2.4 and Article 2.5, saying that international treaties ratified by Kenya shall become part of law in Kenya. So even without the fact that the Refugee Act said anything about it, the Constitution is supreme. And the Constitution has provided that international treaties ratified by Kenya are laws in Kenya. So why is Kenya now violating the law? And that's why I was starting with the statement, injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. Because it will be injustice. It's against the Constitution.
Okay, injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. We'll stop it at that, the first session, and we'll come back for the second session and take you back to the artists.
My people, I am so excited to be part of this band, courtesy of Dina. And the amazing crew that I feel Dina will represent. But of course, maisha haya ninapita tu, hali hii ya sasa ni kwa muda tu, ushindi wangu ukaribu nami, mtetezi wangu yu hai, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo. Silalamiki wala sikufuru, najua
nimejulishwa, imani yangu ipo kwenye kipimo. Najua itakwisha tu, sitamani ya wengine wala sijilinganishi. Najua wakati wangu upo, siogopeshwi na mapito ninayoyapitia, na mwamini yule aliyeruhusu nipite. Sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki hivi, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo. Hey, mtetezi wangu yu hai, yu hai, yu hai, yu hai, yu hai, yu hai. Hey, mtetezi wangu yu hai, yu hai, anaishi, yu hai, yu hai, yu hai. Oh, mtetezi wangu yu hai, yu hai, anaishi, yu hai, yu hai. Sitabaki kama, oh, sitabaki kama, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki hivi, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo, sitabaki kama nilivyo. Because this is the kind of song you sing when local integration is something that's actually being implemented. You see, this is the kind of song you sing when a refugee status is actually treated as a legal status. You know? This is the kind of song you sing when the refugees are considered human. I mean, the incumbent laws should actually consider the inherent rights as human beings. This is the kind of song you sing when life is a bit easier for the people around us. This is the kind of song you sing when you're able to register for a business. This is the kind of song you sing when you feel that the host communities have accepted you for who you are. This is the kind of song you sing when you speak against the forced repatriation that's supposed to happen soon. This is the kind of song you sing when you realize that a refugee status is not permanent, and that you and you and you can also be a refugee. So do unto others what you want them to do unto you. This is the kind of song you sing when your new home is actually a home. Sitabaki kama nilivyo, 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 sitabaki kama nilivyo.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That was such an amazing piece from the band, and sitabaki kama nilivyo, as they've said. Thank you so much for the band. And we are coming to you back. We had talked about the Refugee Act of 2006. We talked about the UN Convention, the 1951, the 1967. And now in the second session of this, we are going to discuss about the pending Refugee Bill of 2019, and also solution in regards to Kenya refugee policy and law. Welcome back to this set. And just to kick us off, the Refugee Bill of 2019. Mr. Obogi, what should you make of this bill?
Thank you. I think it is also important to note that, we had now the incumbent policy, which was declared unconstitutional. The courts have said that actually it violates the right to dignity of the refugees. I would then want to imagine that the drafters of the 2019 bill then thought of ways in which, for example, to deal with this whole issue of encampment and movement, because it still looks like an issue that has to be dealt with. The designated areas of residence for the refugees. But I feel, reading from the 2019 bill, it tends to sort of diversify, to make it broader, because it does not only designate places where refugees are to stay, but rather makes it possible for the refugees to be in counties, designated counties. For example, Wajir and Turkana are said to have made strides in trying to sort of integrate these people within the counties. But then, even with the hits, the bill seems to have some misses. And one of the misses that the bill tends to have is the whole issue of, it provides that the refugees would then be able to be involved in the economic and social development of the country. But the refugee falls short of a clear definition of the involvement. If you read the Ugandan Act, it tends to be a bit clearer. It provides the matrix upon which now you will have these refugees being able to be integrated and given jobs, okay? But our act still has that vagueness, which I think, again, might have people run to court and say probably it's still discriminatory. Another area is the issue of local integration, which more or less seems like an overlap with the whole issue of involvement. But then when you talk about local integration, it talks of social integration. Begs the question, what becomes of economic integration? Where do these people fall and what becomes of them? So the bill is a product of discussions, conversations, which seems to be a step towards the right direction, but then more needs to be done. And that is why the bill, when it becomes the act, shouldn't be the end, but rather that is why the country or the government still retains the right and responsibility to come up with policies that supplement the bill.
Okay, you've talked about policies that supplement the bill. Jermaine, you seem to agree with what Mr. Obogi is saying.
Yes, I think to point out that the realization of refugee full integration will be a progressive process. And therefore, I am certain that we will not achieve everything at a go. I was involved in the nascent stages of development of the Refugee Bill of 2019. And what you find in that particular bill is that it observes about four aspects. One, it acknowledges that we have county governments that were not in existence in 2006. And therefore, the place of the county government also in fostering access to services of refugees that reside in those particular areas. As Obogi has said, it looks at expanding the area of designation from just the camp to the counties so that refugees are able to participate in the social and economic affairs of those particular counties where they come from. Thirdly, it gives the responsibilities of government, or the government commits that it will pursue local integration, it will pursue repatriation, it will pursue even resettlement quotas for refugees within the country where they are. And when you look at that, that is a critical aspect of the durable solution that we're actually looking towards. That particular bill in section 19, sorry, it speaks about economic inclusion of refugees using the identity card. And for me, that is a big plus, because much of the discrimination that has happened in terms of inclusion is because the refugee identification card has not had a place. What refugees have been asking for a long period of time is that, what is the value of this particular ID that you give me? If it will not be recognized when I want to open a bank account, if it will not be recognized when I want to work, if it will not be recognized when I want to go and access other social services. And therefore, the strength in itself of that particular document being the adequate document for access of social and economic services is a big plus towards opening the economic and part of the social inclusion of refugees. What needs to happen is that the regulations that come up from this particular bill, if it becomes an act, then they need in themselves to give life into this particular act about the practical aspect of the same.
And I was about to ask, how practical will it be in terms of implementation?
Yes, in terms of implementation, I think we will be more alert to see that what happened with the 2006 Act does not prevail again. And therefore, the practical aspect, that's why I am acknowledging that we will not get everything at once. But if we can be able to get small milestones towards the realization of economic and social inclusion, and which the regulation will come out then to streamline, then will be a big plus. Because, for instance, what that particular bill envisions is that refugees will not require to have work permits for them to be able to work. That is, if the reading of the ID card will be adequate for them to access social and economic services, then that will be a big plus to a majority of refugees that we have in this particular country. The basic services of health, education that government is going to be looking at, and it's bestowed upon the Commissioner for Refugee Affairs, then they have the potential then of opening up the incumbent policy. Though it doesn't expressly state that it will lift the incumbent policy. But if government is to follow the realization of that particular bill, in itself, then it opens up, because the only way to involve people in economic aspects is opening up the incumbent policy. The only way to ensure social inclusion is opening up the incumbent policy. The only way for government working out local integration is opening up the incumbent policy. And therefore, the regulations that come with it, we will be more waiting to see how then do we actualize the aspirations that we bring into that particular bill, though I understand that we will not have realized everything at a go, but it will be a step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jamil. Just to turn gears on, Carol, he has mentioned about the local integration. We've seen the 2019 bill, and it is mentioned about the resettlement of the refugees, especially in the counties. Now, you mentioned earlier on about the opportunities, competing opportunities, employment, and everything else. How safe will the refugees be when it comes to integration in the local communities? And is the local community, are they ready for this?
Okay, thank you for that question. In terms of local integration, first, I think it's been said here, we require political goodwill, because the government will set precedent, how the government also should take lead. So I think it's time for that social local integration. And it would the good thing about, again, this refugee bill that wasn't there before, it recognizes like a huge tussle between the host community and refugees is also things this natural resources. So natural resources or social amenities. So this bill even makes reference to the fact that these social amenities, like even in the camps or wherever they settle, or even in settlements, would be available to both locals and the refugee community. So having social amenities that are open to all, instead of if like there is aid being given, like even if it's food, but I know we are moving towards self-reliance, but if there's a school, why can't it benefit the local children there and also the refugee community? So it just depends on how it's carried out. But I think we are the good thing now, having it now in the bill, once it comes to law, will set precedent in a sense. We'll have a legal framework. Then now the refugee bill also has an administrative structure. So a lot. There's also the involvement of county governments and national government, I believe, through the refugee secretariat. So it's just how the good thing is that the bill will create a legal framework within which this local integration can be done.
Okay. Yes, Jack, what will this mean, the bill? Supposing it passes, what will it mean, especially to the refugee community?
Thank you, Mamadi. The bill is actually a plus, although it doesn't mean we have achieved everything, just like Jonathan and Jasmine have already said. The fact that you will be able to actually access services within a particular county is a big plus. But I thought maybe it is going to allow you to move cross-county so that you can actually stay anywhere that you want. But we are hoping for the best, because even if talking about what Caroline was saying, for instance, if you're moving from within Turkana district, it's Turkana County now. If you're moving within Turkana County, you are going to get roadblocks, and you will be asked to present your ID. And if you don't have an ID, and if you have a refugee ID and you do not have a traveling document, you will be told to go back to the camp. That is one of the challenges that we face. And just like any other community, the refugee community will be just like any other tribe in Kenya. That is one thing we'll acknowledge. And the small discriminatory things that are always within our system, we should not expect them to just disappear. They will always be there, because sometimes someone feel like when they are in Kirinyaga and you are maybe Jaluo, you think that you will be discriminated. We should expect these things sometime. But at least we all have friends. Like myself, I've made so many friends from Turkana. I'm able to stay in Lodwar and Kainuk because of the friends I've met during my lifetime in school. They are the people I've interacted with. And these are people who are able to show me that you can buy this plot, you can stay here, we can work together, we can manage a hotel or law firm together. So this is an advantage to the refugees like myself. So it means that if I'm a refugee in Kakuma, I can actually work in Lodwar or in Kainuk or Marich or anywhere within Turkana or Katilu or Takwel. So it is a plus, yeah? But we just like said that it is small steps. Let us hope that maybe Kenya is going to bring regulations to allow refugees to actually, if you have maybe a job in Nairobi, you will be able to actually come and stay in Nairobi. There will be no such restriction of movement just because you're supposed to reside in a specific county. So that is all we can hope for at the moment. And they should also allow refugees to be in big cities like Nairobi, Mombasa, and such places. If they are going to designate more places, then I think it will be a big plus.
Okay. Maybe just to hear from one of the audiences about, yes, Komora.
Thank you very much. I have a question. Because you have spoken about the lifting of the encampment. Yeah. So what's happened right now? What's the government doing right now for the refugees to make them feel at home? At least make them feel wanted right now, as I speak, as the other things are being addressed right now. What's the government doing right now for the people? Because I've seen a lot of people around from Southern Sudan in town. So are they just there roaming around? Are they legally operating? What's happening to these guys? Are they just here waiting? What's happening to them currently right now?
Okay.
Yes. The government of Kenya has been graceful enough to welcome refugees in the country, and that has happened for many years. And that the department, through the Department of the Refugee Affairs Secretariat, they have issued then documentations to refugees who reside within the country. And therefore, refugees within the country are actually legally in the country. They have documentation to that particular effect, whether they are asylum seekers or whether they are refugees. Though we understand that we have had a problem for the last couple of months since government has stopped then registering the registration of new persons who are coming to the country. since it is working towards the closure of the camps by May of next year. But in terms of what government has done, government has welcomed refugee. It has offered them documentation and has provided security for the places of residence, either in the camps in Kakuma and in Dadaab.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Is he roaming around?
Yes. So Bogi asking, are you roaming around?
Oh yes. Thank you, Obogi.
Yes.
Just want to add on a personal experience. Someone like myself, although you are designated to be in the camp, sometimes there are reasons whereby you can be allowed to stay outside the camp, and some of the reasons is when you are sick. When you are coming out of the camp for educational purposes, maybe you have a work permit and maybe your employment station will be Nairobi or anywhere. So, and such other matters that you will have to explain to the Refugee Affairs Secretariat, then they are going to actually allow you. There is a vetting process that is normally done. You apply and then they at appointed date, they told you to come, and then your process, you will have to present documents to prove that you're actually going somewhere. Like if you're a student, you have gotten a scholarship from anywhere, whether from UK and this, or nowadays because there is a German scholarship program called DAFI that is sponsoring a lot of refugees. So they are also working with UNHCR and they facilitate documentation for you to travel outside the camp to go to the school where you're supposed to study. Someone like myself, I was in the camp in July. I had to obtain a traveling document for me to come back to Nairobi. But when you are already within Nairobi and you are in school, you have your school ID, unless you now contravene the law, that will bring the question, so you are illegally in Nairobi. So you'll be taken back, but there is an avenue for renewing these documents. Like if you've been given a 6-month document, there is this school program still continuing, you go back to the Refugee Affairs Secretariat, they renew that document for you to continue studying. And when you are given long holidays, it is expected that you go back to the camp. But some of us, you don't want to go back to the camp. Life, you see, is becoming comfortable. Maybe you will talk to some people here nicely, and then they will say, okay, we're going to give you an internship. And then when you get that internship, you don't want to go back. You just want to acquire skills and learn and see how to work. So that's what some of us are doing. Like for me, since I came, I've been trying to be busy, to be doing something so that I don't have to end up in the camp again. So that is what most of the people do. Yeah, either they are in school or they have come for maybe because we are sick and such things. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to add, you guys mentioned that some guys came from high school, right? They can't go to the next level, right? So are they working right now? Are they do something right now? Because they're not going past high school, right? Right now, they can be allowed by the law. So are they just stagnated right somewhere? Are they being given some opportunities to do right now, or what's happening to them right now? Because they have maybe passed the exams. So what's happening to those guys right now?
Those who have finished high school,
yeah,
but they cannot transition to universities and colleges.
Tertiary, yeah.
Okay, if you're a refugee, the normal thing is you're expected to go back to the camp until you get an opportunity to come and study. But the thing is, South Sudanese, there are those who are here using passport. They have residencies, they have families here, and those people have passport, but they are refugees. But you cannot tell on the street who is a refugee and who is here because maybe the parent is a government official and they have brought them to school in Kenya. You see such things. So there are some dynamics there. Even in Somali, there are people who have been brought here for schooling purposes, but maybe they have a parent or in the state government of Somalia. That is how it is, and it is so hard to tell. Yeah.
Maybe just to get to Jermaine, do you think, because you're in protection and advocacy, and maybe Obogi could weigh in sometime later, do you think the challenges that the audience, Mr. Komora has asked, do you think it will be curbed with this 2019 bill if it is assented to law?
Some of the challenges will still be there. Because, for instance, majority of persons who finish high school in the camp don't make their way to tertiary institutions. A few, as Jack said, get scholarships, and therefore they come to the city, so they come for tertiary education, and they also others come to the university. So the bill in itself, I would not say that it will cure that particular problem, because it has an element of finances in itself. And so I think where we could begin is that if refugees were picked in the job admission, then it would mean that they are going to pay less amount of money, and so it's easier for institutions offering scholarship to offer scholarship to a larger number of people than the number that they are currently offering. And therefore, that particular problem will still exist, just as like it exists in the wider Kenyan population, where very few transition into institutions because of failure to afford school fees. But I think once we open the economic aspect, where refugees can be able to fend for themselves, then they will still, to a large extent, be able to afford and pay for vocational skill training for their own children. And therefore, those instrumental progress will go a long way into solving that particular problem.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe to get to one of the audience, before I come back to the audience, what will the 2019 bill mean to the refugees? If it passes, what will it mean, the 2019 bill? The audience, yes. Maybe I just get to, Genevieve, sorry.
Okay. So I think I've already started seeing some positive changes in different places because like now there are some banks that are allowing refugees to open accounts. And before that was not the case. There were all the banks did not allow refugees to open banks account. So I think there has been a shift towards positivity, but like Jamin has said, it's going to be a slow process that we cannot necessarily do anything about at the moment. But I think it's a shift towards positivity.
Are you optimistic about it?
Yeah. I want to be hopeful. I don't want to lose hope that after everything has been said and done, that there is nothing else that can be done. But I just want to be hopeful that there are better things ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe just to Obogi, wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, I wanted to say the whole encampment and movement and the introduction of counties as again, places of residence or designation. It is difficult to say with certainty that this is what the drafters intended to have. But then a wider and objective reading into that would say, because there are tertiary institutions within these counties, then it would mean that it would be a bit easier for them to actually be enrolled into these institutions. Let's not forget that actually this is a human rights corpus, where the realization of these rights is a bit difficult even for the locals. The government is accused time and again for violating rights of their citizens. Okay, so it will be quite an ambitious thing to say that actually the government then is trying to absolutely realize these rights of refugees. That is why we are saying that the discussion is actually moving now. It is becoming more at least, incorporating. It is becoming, the realization is more towards getting rid of these hurdles. Individuals who have finished their high school can be able to get into tertiary institutions which are spread out within the counties. It doesn't mean that there will be designated places within every other county in 47. Could be quite a stretch. Let's not forget where we began, that the whole issue of refugees in this country is one that the government is keen to ensure that it does away with it. So it means that if we are going forward and we're integrating them, we're going to close our borders. But one of the performers there said that you cannot wish away these things in the world. It happens. Today you're peaceful, the next time you're in turmoil, like happened in this country in 2007 and 2018, 2008. So the point is, we are making strides, positive strides, however, in a slower pace. There are positive development. If this bill is to be assented and becomes an act, it will be a positive step. but much still needs to be done.
Much still needs to be done. Caroline, let's not get to the policies. You talked about the Act of 2019, the bill, which is still a bill actually, not an act yet. Now, how better and practical can the policies be made to accommodate both the host country and also the refugees? How better can it be made?
Okay. Like even with the bill that's pending either presidential assent or going into Senate, we still find a lot of things have come up. The whole issue about social economic integration, about counties being, instead of refugees being in designated areas, counties now being, refugees being allowed to reside in specific counties. But we find that the Act requires, in order for an act to be operationalized, any act in law in Kenya, under the Kenyan law, requires regulations. So I feel that if the regulations will, some of these things that maybe sound ambiguous, like if it's education, some certain quotas for just the way Kenyan children go to school. We also have refugee children going to school, but when we even go towards the tertiary level, maybe getting certain quotas, some of these things maybe will be achieved by maybe regulations that now may be more specific and will be more specific towards certain things that are coming up within the Act. So a good thing would be to provide for regulations. And now we say if this Act, the president, it either goes to Senate, goes through the Senate, goes for presidential assent. Once it's assented, then there should be like a certain timeline within which regulations should be. And what the Act says, it's the CS is supposed to come up with regulations. So there should be certain timelines for the CS to come up with regulations, which will operationalize those things that look fluid or up in the air. By having regulations, we are somewhat better than having no regulations at all. So maybe a timeline should be put in for the regulations to come into place, and maybe it will try and put some of these things into squares and boxes.
Should we be hopeful, considering that the government in the past, the implementation has proved to be a bit difficult? How hopeful should we be when it comes to this? Because you mentioned about a certain timeline for the CS to enact it. So how hopeful should we be when it comes to this?
I think we should be hopeful. Other, like in the past, laws have been made. Then we have the comments. So once they comment, they get that legal backing, or they can be enforced. So some certain aspects with that bill, once it becomes law, start to essentially be operational. But of course, there are those things that maybe may, as Jamin was saying, may be progressive. So I think once it becomes to law, it gets that legal backing. So some provisions take on with immediate effect.
Okay.
And others may be done progressively.
Okay. Jack, you want to say something?
Yeah, is just to add on to what Caroline has said. You know, the way the government works is through policies, yeah? And it is expected that policy should precede law. And I believe the current discussion that we are having, and especially even the joint statement by the government and the UNHCR in itself is a policy. The fact that they are thinking about integration is a policy at the moment as we are discussing it, yeah? But now that policy need to be regularized, to be made law, and the regulations of how to operationalize the same have to be made, like Caroline has said. I think that is the direction to go. If the government is serious, then they should stop thinking about repatriation. If they are serious, they should start thinking about the issue of integration as a policy, that the government is going to deal with refugees, because you cannot send back people to places where they fear that they are going to be persecuted. So the government should leave that as an open-ended, because for you to go back to your country is a personal choice. Some people, even they do not need to be repatriated. Once you feel like you're safe to go back home, you'll pack your things and you go. You don't need to come to UNHCR or government of Kenya and say, please repatriate me. You don't need to do that. You'll just decide, pack your bags, and then you go to your own country. You go and acquire the national IDs and passports and everything, yeah? So the thing is, the government of Kenya, once it has decided on the policy of integration as part of achieving the way in which it is going to manage refugees in Kenya, then it should move forward and actually make sure it come up with the laws, like Jermaine had said before, like the Section 17 of the Immigration Act. Then now they are going to introduce such policies and regulations in which now refugees will have to wait for a certain number of years for them to apply for national IDs, to then to become citizens, and I think that is the way to go. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Jermaine, you want to say something?
Yes, I think I think in terms of policy, this country has not had written policies on refugee matters for over the period that we have hosted refugees. And therefore, it has not been possible for one to go to the archives and say, this is the policy of government on how to deal with refugees. We were hoping that we would finally then get a policy document in terms of how governments want to be dealing with refugees. Government came up with what we call the CRF, the Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework, in October last year, which was made public in January of this year. That particular document in itself speaks about how government intends to deal with certain aspects of on including refugees. If that particular document will be then followed into, then my take is that we will have a complete realization of self-reliance about refugees. Because it speaks about inclusion in terms of livelihoods, speak about inclusion in terms of health, inclusion in terms of education, making sure that we have skill certification and certificate accreditation for refugees who have come into the country with their own certificate so that they can be able to participate within the economic spheres of this particular country. The problem about that then is that we have a government that comes up with a CRF document that we are all celebrating that it's a move toward the right direction. Then come March, the government is speaking about closing the camps in the next 1 year. While within that particular document, it speaks about how they modernize housing within those particular camps, how they make sure that we have water and sanitation within those particular camps. So I think the conflicting policies that government of Kenya has had towards refugees over time is what then alarms us, and we do not know what exactly are we awaiting by the end of the day. But we remain hopeful that with the 2019 bill, if it becomes act, with regulation that will come into place. Actually, when we were doing the zero draft of the 2019 bill, we put that within 6 months, the CS would come up with regulations into place. We hope that is realized so that then we can begin seeing what are the fruits of the 2019 bill once it becomes act.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Bogi, what are we awaiting? Because I was about to ask that question, the contradictory duality between now we have the pending bill, which is quite good, and most of the people actually love it, both the refugees and some host communities, I could say. But in the same manner, in the same breath, we also have an ultimatum here. The date has been set, June 2022, repatriation of refugees should be done. And there's also a roadmap to it, with which the government discussed with the UNHCR. Now, how do we go about this? Because it seems to be an overlap when it comes to policies. How do you regard this?
Again, when you hear top government officials just wake up one day and then say that we're going to close down refugee camps, it's just alarming. For lack of a better word, it's crazy. But then the question is the practicality of that. I keep saying that it looks like a way in which the government threatens to engage a number of stakeholders and see what happens to that effect. And as Jamin had said, because we already have policies that have already been developed, or even we have discussions around the whole idea of making life better for the refugees, but then again, we're giving ultimatums. My personal opinion would be that 2022 is unrealistic. Closure is a pipe dream. It will not happen. But then the discussion, it means that, we lack the political goodwill. We lack the political goodwill to actually guarantee these people, the refugees, the inherent right, their respective inherent right. We should therefore do more as a country, because the whole argument has been national security. It's a threat to our national security, and if we keep on opening the doors, then we are burdening our economy. And truth be told, actually, the Kenyan government does so little in terms of providing for these refugees. It's a burden that is, again, carried by a different entity and not the Kenyan government. So we should not lose hope. The policies should still be there. That's why we need the bill, because I keep on saying wars and civil violence or conflicts can never be wished away. It can never be wished away because you've seen what has happened in Afghanistan, okay, where the president of the US was very confident that once they withdraw, then the government will be in charge, and now they're scrambling to take out their citizens. So the Kenyan government should be alive to that effect, that we can be victims as well, and therefore we should be sensible hosts. Yeah,
should be sensible host. I hear we have a question from the audience.
Mine is a bit general because from this discussion, I realized that we, as Kenya, we seem to be rushing to ratify some of these international treaties or even these laws that we're passing. But on the ground, things seem different. We are not living up to those promises that we seem to have appended. So I think my question is, where do we stand really? Maybe to our legal experts here today.
Caroline, I'll give it to you. Where do we stand when it comes to ratifying the conventions, the UN conventions? Where do we stand?
I think the ratification was good. Was a good thing. Even the fact that we've domesticated these laws, we even have a Refugee Act. I think it was a good starting point to have to ratify these international instruments, regional instruments, have our own laws. So I think it was we had good intentions, but it seems that we, the Kenyan government isn't really living up to it. I think the government should do better. I think that has been my line all through this. The government should do better. I feel we should have like now what Jamin said about the policy is not being on paper. It's always good to have policies that are on paper. The government seeming to have like even the government itself. We have government is made up of the executive, legislature, and judiciary. So legislature, clearly they are doing their job. We have an act in place. We have a new bill. We have a new bill that's passed National Assembly going to Senate. We have the judiciary just looking back, doing what they do, getting petitions taken to court, and actually the judiciary keeping to a human rights-based approach. Then we have the executive that somewhat seems hostile. So there's also just government just uniting to have a consistent and coherent ways of dealing with refugees. Because right now, you know how we are saying that it's dual. Now, even in the government, depending on where you stand and where you sit, we are having also, there's that people are thinking differently. So I think just government coming up with a coherent approach. Are we for these people? Are we not for them? And if not for them, what do we, so just a coherent approach.
A coherent approach.
But it all began from a good place.
Okay. Yes.
Again, ratification of international treaties or regional treaties is an applaudable thing. It's a good thing. Because imagine of a state where we are not party to any of these instruments. It means that a country or government can violate these rights without any recourse, like without being held accountable by any instrument or international entity. There has been a question on whether most countries are burdened with what they call treaty fatigue. Like you keep on ratifying, but there is no implementation. And if you see, the African Union has what they call a peer review, where countries then are able to report, on the human rights situation in a country. What have you done? What steps have you made? What are the challenges? If you go and see what the number of times Kenya has reported, you'd be surprised, because sometimes it is not an obligation. You are encouraged to come up with a report and say, this is what we've done with the type of treaties that we've ratified. But if you compare countries that have ratified these instruments and those that have not, it is that there is more hope in those that have ratified as opposed to those that have not ratified. We keep on buttressing the baton and saying that actually there is more that needs to be done with regards to the implementation. But again, these treaties are very important in developing policies as well, because we're able to identify some of the gaps and some of the areas that needs to be developed and even some of the areas that were probably not envisioned in our country, but then because of the treaties, we're able to infuse them. We are not there yet, I keep on saying that, but then ratification is a good step.
Ratification is a good step. Jermaine, as we now come to the close and the end of the discussion, perhaps you'd give us what are your highlights and also what would you say are the sustainable solution, policy-oriented solution? Just give us your last word when it comes to this discussion, the Kenya refugee law and policy.
Thank you. I think we have adequate legal instruments to be able to ensure both social and economic inclusion of refugees is actually realized in the country. The very key aspect that we could be looking at is the refugees themselves being self-reliant, so that they stop being a burden either to the country or even to the international community. For that then to be realized, the political will of the government needs to be there, so that government needs to play their part. The international community needs to play, and the international community needs to play their part. Kenyans on themselves have no problem with refugees. The International Rescue Committee carried out some research a few years ago on the perception of Kenyans on refugees. And Kenyans say that there is no problem with refugees. Kenyans say that there is no problem with refugees participating in the economic space that we have. And therefore, we just need government will to be able to see the realization of this. Again, in terms of the policies, the policies that we're coming up with, the comprehensive refugee response framework, how then do we realize this? Countries like Ethiopia, they passed a progressive act. Uganda has done the same. So we need to keep pace toward the realization of this, and even have peer countries, including the IGAD, because we have passed several declarations. We have the Uganda declarations on livelihood access. We have the Djibouti declaration on education, which look at including refugees in education space for the Djibouti declaration, including refugees in livelihood and other options that we have. And these are all declarations that we have certainly been part of. So it is time that we move toward the realization or the implementation of this declaration and policies, so that then refugees can have a place, refugees can have a home, refugees can have a hope that even in the coming years, they can either be integrated into the country or voluntarily opt to go back to their home countries when they have skills that they can be able to build their countries, when they have know-how that have been transferred unto them. Because if we have neighboring countries that are not stable, then as a country, we will never be stable.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Obogi, your last words comes to policy, the discussion.
I think I would say, I would appreciate that we're having this discussion, because I feel that when we have this discussion, it kickstarts a wave where we keep on insisting and saying that we need more comprehensive policies and laws that are able to protect the refugees in this country. Because nobody, I assure you, nobody would want to flee his own country or her own country to another country to become a beggar. So I think we should do more as a country. It is a plea to every other person, stakeholder, and stakeholders includes every individual in this country. So my plea is that let the discussion continue, and the discussion can also include, opinions, writing, so that we can have this discussion sort of delivering a hope for the refugees in this country.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Jack.
Thank you, Mamadi. I'm happy we are having this discussion. What I can say is this about Kenya. Considering that it has given itself the mandate to actually receive and protect refugees, the best thing that Kenya can do at the moment, if it feels like it is having so much burden on the refugees, is that the international community is a place where people sit down and people discuss issues. Kenya is not a small country. And recently, they have actually been given a slot in the UN National Security Council where all these issues are discussed. There is no way in which Kenya should not come out clearly before the international community and say that I have been overburdened with refugees and I need help. And this is where the dialogue has to change and see how the international community can actually come and help Kenya. So Kenya should use its current position to actually bring on the table pertinent issues regarding the refugees. If they are really if they feel like the refugee crisis is so much burden on the economy, on the host communities and all things, then they should bring up a very good agenda that is worth discussing at the UN Security Council. And citing is even the Global Compact on Refugees that was recently drafted in 2019 and which Kenya has already signed. It says that there is sharing of refugee burden through maybe resettlement to third countries, integration and sightings. So these are some of the things that are available to Kenya. And so Kenya should come out clearly and talk to the international community and say that, okay, I want us to share this burden since it is something we have already agreed. I'm receiving too many refugees, so I want you to do something about it. And that is the best way Kenya can actually offload this one on its shoulders if it thinks that it is having too much refugees that are coming within the country. It is what you have also if you have resources, even in the African context. The places that have foods, naturally people will go there. Places that are secure, people will normally go there. Before the introduction of borders, the Toposa people, the Karamojong and the Turkana people, they were one. Right now, a Toposa coming to Turkana, who is speaking the same language, is a refugee. This is someone who speaks the same language, everything, culture, even Tobonglore, Toposa people come to Turkana. But now, these people have no space in Kenya because of the borders that we have. So these are some of the things that we need to discuss for us to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Caroline, last words.
I think firstly, I'm glad to be here. I'm really happy about this conversation, and I believe it's many amongst more to come. And also, I think I'd initially been briefed that the audience would be comprised of refugees and also the host community. So I think so I hope this is the beginning of more such forums where we're not only having forums for refugees and the host community, but people can come together and openly deliberate on certain issues. On something my colleague has mentioned about burden sharing, how maybe, yes, we actually as Kenya took in and bit more than we could chew. So in terms of even what he's saying, we should come clean. Also, we should also look at East Africa. Maybe there are other, as we look at how there's resettlement to third, possibly developed countries, there's local integration here, there's voluntary repatriation. Also, maybe there are other alternatives that maybe the East African countries can help us accommodate refugees. So we should consider that we can own up to the international community, but also we can also look regionally what can be done to ease the burden on Kenya. Maybe we took on more than we could actually handle.
Okay. Yes, I want to thank the audience for taking part of this discussion today, and also to thank my panelists for coming and engaging more when it comes to policies and issues in regards to refugees. And I just want to say this has been the fourth forum for refugees where we've been discussing the pertinent issues when it comes to the refugees. We've done the first, second, and the third, and now this was the fourth and the last forum for 2021. I just want to say a special thank you to each and every person and stakeholders that have taken part into this. I want to specifically bring to thank the sign language interpreters, that is Faith and Clinton, who've done quite an amazing job. And also I want to thank our partners, the Anika Initiative, who've been quite instrumental when it comes to hosting and organizing this. I want to thank the crew behind, who've been quite good when it comes to executing and shooting. I want to thank the Anika Initiative, the Refu Poet, and also the Civil Peace Service Special Initiative on Displacement, that is on the German Corporation. And we want to thank each and every one of them. And now as we're going to close on a high, where we are going to now get back to the band. And as we started with the high note, we are going to end with the high note. I've been your host, Emmanuel Mamadi. Until next time, thank you so much.
Yay. Dina. I will trust in you and know that you are with me forever. And I'll confide in you and know
that you are with me forever. Even in the darkness, you will be my light. Even when I'm hopeless, you will be my guide. I will not be shaken, I will not be moved. Even in the chaos, I know that you're good. You're the keeper, protector. It is you that holds us together when everything else fails us. It is you that holds us together. And I will trust in you, your thoughts and plans of me, they are good. And I will wait on you, I know that you will see me through. Even in the darkness, you will be my light. Even when I'm hopeless, you will be my guide. I will not be shaken, I will not be moved. Even in the chaos, I know that you're good. Oh, you're the keeper, protector. It is you that holds us together when everything else fails us. It is you that holds us together. Yeah. Whoa. You're the keeper, protector. It is you that holds us together when everything else fails us. It is you that holds us together. You're the keeper, protector. It is you that holds us together. Yeah, holds us together. Whoa, you're the keeper, protector. It is you that holds us together when everything else fails us. It is you that holds us together. You're the keeper, protector. It is you that holds us together.
The online dialogue series of RefuPoet was commissioned by the Special Initiative on Displacement SIF, program of the Civil Peace Service of GIZ. We appreciate the discussions and insights shared. The opinions expressed in these dialogue series are those of the speakers. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of GIZ.